The doctor's words still echoed in Eleanor Harrison's ears as the stagecoach rattled toward Yreka, California, carrying her further from everything she had ever known. Your constitution is simply too delicate for this world, my dear. You must accept your limitations. Her mother had died believing those words, had raised Eleanor in cotton wool and whispered warnings, had built a prison of porcelain teacups and embroidered handkerchiefs, where Eleanor's spirit slowly suffocated. When her father remarried barely 6 months after the funeral in the spring of 1876, Eleanor had made her decision. Her aunt in Yreka had written for years, begging her to visit the wild Northern California town nestled in the shadow of Mount Shasta. Eleanor had finally written back, her hands shaking as she penned the words that would change everything. The stagecoach hit another rut in the rough mountain road, and Eleanor's head cracked against the wooden frame. The other passengers, a mining engineer and a saloon woman, barely glanced her way. Eleanor touched her temple, feeling the tender spot that would surely bruise, and looked out at the towering pines and rushing creeks of the Siskiyou Mountains. The air here smelled different than Boston, sharp with pine sap and mountain cold, even in late summer. Yreka Station, 15 minutes, the driver called down. Eleanor smoothed her traveling dress, dark blue wool that was already too warm for the California climate, and tried to calm her racing heart. She had never been west of Pennsylvania. She had never been anywhere without a chaperone. She had never done anything her stepmother would consider unseemly or dangerous. That version of Eleanor Harrison belonged to another life now. The stagecoach pulled into Yreka just as the sun began its descent toward the peaks. The town sprawled along Yreka Creek, a jumble of wooden buildings and dirt streets, nothing like the orderly brick and cobblestone of Boston. Mountains rose on every side, their slopes dark with forest. Eleanor stepped down from the coach, her legs unsteady after 3 weeks of travel, and looked around for her Aunt Margaret. "Miss Harrison?" A woman in her 50s approached, her face weathered but kind. "I'm Margaret Hendricks. Welcome to Yreka, child." Eleanor embraced her aunt, breathing in the scent of sage and wood smoke that clung to her clothes. "Thank you for having me." "Having you? Darling girl, I've been waiting for you to escape that gilded cage for years." Margaret took Eleanor's carpet bag and linked their arms together. "Come on, let's get you settled before dark. My house is just up the hill." As they walked through town, Eleanor tried not to stare at everything around her. Men with guns on their hips stood outside saloons. A group of Chinese miners spoke in rapid Cantonese near the general store. A woman in pants, actual trousers, rode past on horseback without anyone batting an eye. This was a different world entirely. "You'll get used to it," Margaret said, noticing her wide eyes. "Yreka's rough around the edges, but it's got a good heart. Been here since the gold rush days, though most of the easy gold's long gone now. Logging and cattle ranching mostly keep us going these days." They climbed the hill to a neat cabin with a garden out front. Inside, everything was simple but comfortable, nothing like the cluttered Victorian parlor Eleanor had left behind. "I know it's not what you're accustomed to," Margaret began, but Eleanor cut her off. "It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect." That night, Eleanor lay in the small bedroom under a quilt Margaret had stitched herself, and listened to sounds she had never heard before. Coyotes howling in the distance, the wind rushing through the pines, the creek babbling somewhere below. She felt more alive than she had in her entire 22 years. The next morning, Margaret took her into town to meet people and get supplies. Eleanor wore her simplest dress, but she still felt overdressed compared to the practical clothing most women here favored. They were at the general store when Eleanor first heard the whispers. "That's Margaret's niece from back east," a woman murmured to her companion. "Looks like a strong breeze would snap her in half." Poor thing probably won't last a month out here, the other replied. This country isn't kind to delicate constitutions. Eleanor's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin up and continued examining the bolts of fabric. She had traveled 3,000 miles to escape being called delicate, and here it was following her already. Don't mind them, Margaret said quietly. You'll prove them wrong soon enough. But the whispers continued. At the church social the following Sunday, Eleanor overheard two ranchers' wives discussing her. She looks like a porcelain doll. One winter here will send her running back east. At the post office, the clerk looked at her with undisguised pity when she asked about work. Not much call for genteel skills out here, miss. This is hard country. Eleanor refused to be defeated. She helped Margaret with everything, hauling water from the creek, tending the garden, washing clothes on the scrub board until her hands were raw. Her body ached in ways it never had before. But she welcomed the pain as proof she was truly living. 3 weeks after her arrival, Margaret announced they needed to go up to the high country to visit her friend Sarah Morrison, whose husband had been injured in a logging accident. It's a full day's ride, and we'll need to pack supplies. Think you're up for it? Absolutely, Eleanor said without hesitation. They set out before dawn on 2 sturdy horses Margaret borrowed from a neighbor. Eleanor had taken riding lessons in Boston, sedate walks around a manicured park. But this was different entirely. The trail climbed steep and rocky through dense forest, crossing icy streams and skirting cliff edges that made her stomach lurch. But she kept her seat and pushed on, determined not to show any weakness. By late afternoon, they reached the Morrison homestead, a cabin in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. Sarah Morrison came out to greet them, a tired-looking woman with a baby on her hip and worry etched into every line of her face. Margaret, thank God. Tom's fever won't break, and I don't know what else to do. They spent the evening caring for Tom Morrison, who had developed an infection in his injured leg. Eleanor helped Sarah with the children, 3 little ones under 5, while Margaret treated Tom's wound with poultices and fever remedies. By the time they all collapsed into sleep near midnight, Eleanor was exhausted but felt a deep satisfaction. She had been useful here in a way she never had been in Boston. The next morning, Tom's fever had broken. Sarah wept with relief and insisted they stay for breakfast. They were just finishing when they heard horses approaching fast. Sarah, a man's voice called. You here? That's Pike Merrick, Sarah said, her face brightening. He's a godsend, that man. Lives up in the high mountains, comes down every few weeks to check on us and bring meat. Eleanor followed them outside and stopped dead in her tracks. The man swinging down from a massive roan horse was unlike anyone she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad they blocked the sun and arms thick with muscle that showed clearly through his worn buckskin shirt. His hair was dark brown, falling past his shoulders in waves that looked like they had been finger-combed at best. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, but she could see strong features beneath, all sharp angles and sun-weathered skin. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who feared nothing in this world. Heard Tom was hurt, he said, his voice a deep rumble. Brought some venison and checked your trap line. His fever just broke this morning, thank the Lord, Sarah said. Pike, this is Margaret Hendricks and her niece Eleanor Harrison, visiting from Boston. Those eyes, startlingly blue against his tanned skin, settled on Eleanor. She felt pinned by that gaze, assessed and measured in a single heartbeat. She lifted her chin, refusing to look away. Boston, he repeated, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Long way from home, miss. This is my home now, Eleanor said firmly. One dark eyebrow rose. That so? Before Eleanor could respond, Sarah invited him in for coffee. Pike Merrick filled the small cabin with his presence, making everything seem smaller and more delicate by comparison. He sat at the rough table, and Eleanor noticed his hands, scarred and calloused, were gentle as he accepted the cup Sarah offered. "How's the leg, Tom?" Pike asked. "Painful, but I'll mend. Wife was scared, though. Had reason to be. Infection's nothing to take lightly up here." Pike glanced at Margaret. "You did good work. Poultice smells like yarrow and golden seal." "You know your herbs," Margaret said approvingly. "Have to, living where I do. Nearest doctor's a day's ride, and that's in good weather." "Where exactly do you live, Mr. Merrick?" Eleanor found herself asking. Those blue eyes settled on her again. "Up the mountain. Got a cabin near the snow line. Run trap lines mostly, some hunting, lumber work when I need cash money." "Sounds isolated." "That's the point, Miss Harrison." There was a story there, Eleanor could tell. Something that had driven this man away from civilization and into the wilderness. But his expression made it clear he would not be sharing it with a stranger from Boston. They talked for a while longer, Pike giving Tom advice about keeping weight off the leg and discussing the upcoming winter with Margaret. Eleanor noticed he never quite looked at her again, his attention carefully directed elsewhere. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt oddly insulted. When they prepared to leave, Pike was leaving as well. "I'll ride with you part way," he told Margaret. "Trail's washed out in a couple places from the last storm. Better show you the safe route." They rode in single file through the forest, Pike in the lead on his huge roan, then Margaret and Eleanor bringing up the rear on her borrowed mare. She watched the way Pike sat his horse, easy and relaxed, part of the animal. She watched the way his head turned constantly, alert to every sound and movement in the forest around them. This was a man completely at home in the wilderness, she realized, in a way she could hardly imagine. After an hour, they reached a fork in the trail. Pike reined in and pointed. "Take the right fork here, skirts the new washout. You'll be fine from here." "Thank you, Pike," Margaret said warmly. "You're a good man." He ducked his head, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. "Just being neighborly. You take care now." He started to ride away, then paused and looked back at Eleanor. "Miss Harrison? Word of advice. Those fancy boots you're wearing won't last another week in this country. Get yourself some real work boots before you break an ankle." Then he was gone, his horse disappearing into the trees with barely a sound. "Well," Margaret said, amusement in her voice. "That's Pike Merrick for you. Doesn't say much, but when he does, it's usually worth hearing. He seems very sure of himself," Eleanor said, more sharply than she intended. "He's earned the right to be. Saved more than one family up here during bad winters, brought food when people were starving, found lost children in the forest. People might call him a mountain man, treat him like he's halfway to being a hermit, but everyone respects him." Eleanor thought about that as they rode. She thought about it that evening as she examined her boots and admitted they were already coming apart at the seams. She thought about it the next day when she went into town and bought proper work boots that made her Boston shoes look like ridiculous toys. She thought about Pike Merrick more than she wanted to admit. September turned into October, and Eleanor settled into her new life with a determination that surprised even Margaret. She learned to split wood, though her first attempts sent logs flying in every direction. She learned to handle a rifle, practicing until she could hit a target more often than not. She learned to ride the mountain trails without her heart jumping into her throat at every cliff edge. But the whispers in town continued. "She's trying so hard, poor thing," women would say. "But she's just not built for this life. Too refined, too delicate. She'll give up before the first snow. Eleanor gritted her teeth and worked harder. She took a job at the general store 3 days a week, helping with accounts and inventory. She started teaching reading to some of the miners' children in Margaret's front room on Sunday afternoons. She made herself useful in every way she could think of. And then the weather turned. The first snow came in late October, earlier than usual. Eleanor woke to find the world transformed, everything white and silent. It was beautiful. But Margaret's face was serious at breakfast. This much snow this early is bad news. Folks in the high country need to be warned. Some of them won't have their winter supplies laid in yet. "Can we help?" Eleanor asked immediately. Margaret hesitated. It's hard traveling in snow, especially for someone who isn't used to it. "I can do it," Eleanor said firmly. "Please, Aunt Margaret, I want to help." So they bundled up in every warm thing they owned and rode out with supplies for the high country families. They made it to 3 cabins successfully, delivering food and medicine, checking on children and livestock. They were heading to the 4th when disaster struck. Eleanor's horse stepped wrong on an icy patch and went down hard. Eleanor managed to kick free of the stirrups and roll, but she landed badly, her ankle twisting beneath her. The pain was immediate and intense, stealing her breath. "Eleanor!" Margaret was off her horse in seconds, kneeling beside her. "How bad?" "My ankle," Eleanor gasped. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Margaret checked it carefully. "Badly sprained, maybe broken. We need to get you somewhere warm, and we need to do it now. Storm's coming in." Eleanor looked up and saw dark clouds rolling over the mountains, moving fast. The wind was already picking up, sharp with ice. "Can you ride?" Margaret asked. Eleanor tried to stand and nearly blacked out from the pain. "I don't think so." Margaret's face went pale. They were miles from town, miles from anywhere, and a blizzard was coming. They were in serious trouble. "All right," Margaret said, her voice steady despite her fear. "There's a cabin not too far from here, about a mile north. Pike Merrick's place. We can make it there if we go now." It was the longest mile of Eleanor's life. She rode doubled with Margaret, her injured ankle a constant source of agony, while Margaret led Eleanor's limping horse behind them. The snow began falling in earnest, thick flakes that reduced visibility to almost nothing. The wind howled through the trees, and Eleanor felt cold seeping into her bones, despite her layers of clothing. By the time they reached Pike's cabin, Eleanor was shaking uncontrollably, and Margaret wasn't much better. The cabin was barely visible through the snow, solid and square against the storm. Margaret pounded on the door. It swung open, and Pike Merrick filled the doorway, his eyes widening at the sight of them. "Good God, get inside." He reached out and lifted Eleanor off the horse as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest as he carried her inside. The cabin was blessedly warm, a fire roaring in the stone fireplace. Pike laid Eleanor on a bed covered in furs and immediately turned to Margaret. "You hurt?" "No, but Eleanor's ankle is bad. Happened about 2 hours ago." Pike was already moving, helping Margaret out of her wet coat, then turning to Eleanor. "I need to look at that ankle, Miss Harrison. I'm going to have to take off your boot." Eleanor nodded, gritting her teeth. Pike knelt beside the bed, and his large hands were surprisingly gentle as he carefully removed her boot and sock. Eleanor hissed in pain, but his touch never wavered, steady and sure. "Badly sprained, not broken," he said after a careful examination. "You're lucky. I'm going to wrap it, but it's going to hurt. You need something to bite down on?" "No," Eleanor said through clenched teeth. "Just do it." Those blue eyes met hers, and something flickered in them that might have been respect. Then he went to work, wrapping her ankle in strips of cloth with the sure, practiced movements. Eleanor dug her fingers into the furs beneath her and didn't make a sound, though sweat broke out on her forehead from the pain. "Brave girl," he murmured when he finished. Most men would have been cursing. "I'm not most men," Eleanor managed. "No," he agreed quietly. "You're not." He stood and went to help Margaret with the horses, bringing them into a lean-to shelter attached to the cabin. While he was gone, Eleanor looked around Pike's home. It was one large room, simply furnished but clean and well organized. Furs covered the floor and the bed. Handmade furniture, rough but solid, filled the space. Shelves held books, which surprised her, and supplies neatly arranged. A large bearskin hung on one wall. This was a man who lived alone, but lived well, she realized. Pike came back in with Margaret, both of them covered in snow. "Storm's getting worse," he said. "You're not going anywhere tonight, probably not tomorrow either. I'll sleep on the floor, you ladies take the bed." "We can't put you out of your own bed," Margaret protested. "You can and you will. No arguments." His tone was firm but kind. "I've slept in worse places. Now let's get some food in you both before you freeze from the inside out." He made them soup from dried venison and vegetables, thick and hearty, and Eleanor thought it was the best thing she had ever tasted. As they ate, the storm raged outside, wind screaming around the cabin's corners. But inside, with the fire blazing and hot food in her belly, Eleanor felt safe. "Thank you," she said to Pike, "for taking us in. We would have died out there." "No thanks needed," he said gruffly. "Anyone would do the same." "No," Eleanor said. "They wouldn't. Not everyone would even know how. You saved our lives." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude, his gaze dropping to his soup. "Just glad I was home. Usually I'd be checking trap lines, but something told me to stay put today." They talked quietly as the evening wore on, Margaret sharing news from town, Pike asking about various families. Eleanor noticed he seemed to know everyone despite his isolation, asking after specific children by name, remembering details about people's lives. This man might live alone in the mountains, but he cared about his community. Eventually, Margaret fell asleep, exhausted from the ordeal. Eleanor tried to sleep too, but her ankle throbbed and her mind wouldn't settle. She lay still, not wanting to disturb Margaret, and watched Pike sitting by the fire, adding wood occasionally, keeping watch. "Can't sleep?" he asked quietly, somehow knowing she was awake. "Ankle hurts too much." He rose and went to a shelf, coming back with a small bottle. "Willow bark tincture. Take a spoonful. It'll help with the pain and let you rest." Eleanor accepted the bottle, their fingers brushing. Even through her pain and exhaustion, she felt the contact like a spark. She took the medicine, bitter on her tongue, and handed it back. "Mr. Merrick," she said softly, "why did you look at me that way when we first met? Like I didn't belong here?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Because I've seen women like you before. City-bred, delicate, think they want adventure until they get a real taste of how hard this life is. Then they run back where they came from, or they get hurt or worse. I didn't want to see that happen to you." "I'm not delicate," Eleanor said, surprised by the intensity in her own voice. "No?" He looked at her, his face in shadow. "You sure about that? Because everyone in town says you are. Says you're too refined for this country, too soft. Say you won't last the winter." "Everyone in town is wrong," Eleanor said fiercely. I'm tired of people deciding what I can and cannot do based on how I look. I'm tired of being treated like I'm made of glass. Yes, I was raised in the city. Yes, I had a sheltered upbringing. But I'm stronger than anyone thinks, and I'm not going anywhere. Maybe, Pike said. But wanting to be strong and actually being strong enough to survive out here are two different things, Miss Harrison. Then watch me prove it, Eleanor said. He studied her for a long moment, and Eleanor held his gaze despite her exhaustion and pain. Finally, something shifted in his expression. Maybe I will, he said quietly. The next morning, the storm had blown itself out, leaving a world buried in snow. Margaret's ankle was still badly swollen, and Pike declared they would need to stay at least another day or two before attempting the journey back to town. I don't want to impose, Eleanor said. You're not. Besides, you can't walk on that ankle yet. You just hurt it worse. He paused, then added, I've got work to do around here. If you're determined to prove you're not delicate, you can help instead of lying around feeling useless. Eleanor brightened. What kind of work? Well, you can't stand, but you can sit. I've got animal hides that need scraping and tanning. It's not pleasant work, and it'll make your hands raw, but it needs doing. Show me how. So while Margaret rested, recovering from the ordeal, Eleanor sat on Pike's front porch with her injured ankle propped up and learned how to prepare animal hides. He was right. It wasn't pleasant. The work was hard on her hands and arms, and the smell was terrible. But Eleanor worked steadily, determined to be useful. Pike worked nearby, chopping wood with easy, powerful swings of his axe. Eleanor found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, fascinated by the raw strength in every movement. He was so completely different from every man she had known in Boston, all their refined manners and soft hands and careful speech. Pike Merrick was a force of nature, as wild and untamed as the mountains he called home. You're staring, he said, without looking up from his work. Eleanor felt her cheeks heat. Sorry, I've just never seen anyone split wood quite like that. Because I'm good at it, he said matter-of-factly. Been doing it since I was 10 years old. Is that when you came out west? No, I'm from Oregon originally. Came to California 5 years ago. Eleanor waited, hoping he would say more, but he didn't. The man was as closed off as a locked door, she thought with frustration. But she could be patient. She had nowhere else to be. That evening, Pike made dinner again. Venison steaks with wild onions and some kind of root vegetable Eleanor didn't recognize. It was delicious, and she told him so. You're a good cook, she said. Better than I am, honestly. Have to be, living alone. Either learn to cook or starve, those are your choices. How long have you lived alone up here? 5 years. Don't you get lonely? He looked at her, and his expression was unreadable. Sometimes. But I like the quiet. Too much noise in the world. Too many people wanting things from you. Up here, it's simple. Just me and the mountain. But you still help people, Eleanor pointed out. The Morrisons, other families. You're not as much of a hermit as you pretend to be. One corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Maybe not. The next day, Eleanor's ankle was better. Good enough that she could hobble around with a walking stick Pike fashioned for her. Margaret was recovered as well, and they prepared to return to town. Thank you again, Eleanor said as Pike helped her onto her horse. His hands lingered on her waist for just a moment, and Eleanor felt that spark again, stronger this time. Take care of that ankle, he said. Stay off it for at least a week once you get home, and no more riding in snowstorms. Yes, doctor, Eleanor said with a slight smile. He looked at her, and this time there was definitely amusement in those blue eyes. "You've got spirit, Miss Harrison. I'll give you that." "My name is Eleanor," she said. "And I hope I'll see you again, Mr. Merrick." "Pike," he said, "and you probably will. I come down to town sometimes for supplies." But as they rode away, Eleanor had the distinct feeling that Pike Merrick would avoid town even more now, specifically to avoid seeing her. The thought bothered her more than it should have. The story of their rescue spread through Yreka within hours of their return. Suddenly, Eleanor found herself the subject of intense gossip. But the tone had changed slightly. She had survived a blizzard in the mountains, hadn't she? That was something. Though, of course, Pike Merrick had done all the real work. Poor, delicate thing, she probably would have died without him there to take care of everything. Eleanor wanted to scream. Instead, she threw herself into her work, helping Margaret and working at the store, teaching her students. Her ankle healed slowly, and with it healed her determination to prove herself. She wasn't sure exactly what had changed during those 2 days in Pike's cabin, but something had shifted inside her. She felt different, more alive, more awake to possibilities. November came, cold and crisp. Thanksgiving approached, and Margaret helped organize a community dinner at the church. Eleanor volunteered to help with the cooking and decorating, working alongside women who still looked at her with doubt in their eyes. "Heard Pike Merrick saved your life," one woman said as they peeled potatoes. "Lucky he was home that day." "We were lucky," Eleanor agreed. "But I also walked a mile through a blizzard on a sprained ankle to get to his cabin. That took some strength, too." The woman blinked, as though this hadn't occurred to her. "I suppose it did." Thanksgiving Day arrived clear and cold. The church filled with families, the air warm with the smell of roasted turkey and pie. Eleanor was helping serve when she looked up and saw Pike Merrick standing in the doorway, looking deeply uncomfortable. Margaret spotted him too, and immediately went over, linking her arm through his. "Pike Merrick, you get yourself in here right now. There's plenty of food and you're welcome here." "Didn't mean to intrude," he said. "Just came down for supplies and saw the gathering." "You're not intruding. Come on." Margaret dragged him inside, and Eleanor watched other people's reactions. The men greeted him warmly, clearly respecting him. The women eyed him with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. The children stared openly at this giant mountain man in their midst. Pike sat at a table in the corner, looking like he was calculating his escape route. Eleanor made a decision, filled a plate with food, and brought it to him. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said, setting the plate down. "You shouldn't be waiting on me," he said, frowning. "You were hurt worse than I was." "I'm fine now. My ankle healed perfectly, thanks to your care." She sat down across from him, uninvited. "How have you been?" "Fine. Busy with winter preparations. Must be a lot of work, getting ready for winter alone." "I'm used to it." Eleanor studied him. He looked the same, all hard muscle and weathered skin and carefully controlled power. But there was something in his eyes when he looked at her. Something that made her pulse quicken. "I've thought about you," she said quietly. "Wondered how you were doing up there all alone." His jaw tightened. "Miss Harrison, I should tell you something." "Eleanor." "Eleanor." He said her name carefully, like it was fragile. "You seem like a nice woman, but I'm not the kind of man a woman like you should be interested in." "What kind of woman am I?" Eleanor asked. "The kind who deserves better than a mountain hermit with a dark past and no prospects." "What if I want to decide for myself what I deserve?" He looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. You don't know what you're saying. Then tell me. Tell me about your dark past. Tell me why you live alone on a mountain. Let me decide what I can handle. For a moment, she thought he would actually do it. Then he stood abruptly. Thank you for the food, Miss Harrison. I need to go. He was gone before she could stop him, leaving his plate barely touched. Eleanor sat there, frustration and something else, something warmer and more dangerous, churning in her chest. That man, Margaret said, appearing at her elbow, has been running from something for 5 years. Question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? He clearly doesn't want anything to do with me. Oh, honey. Margaret laughed softly. That man looks at you like you're water and he's been dying of thirst. He wants plenty to do with you. He's just scared. Scared? Pike Merrick? Even mountain men get scared, especially of things that might actually matter. Eleanor thought about that long into the night. She thought about the way Pike had looked at her, the gentleness in his hands when he'd tended her ankle, the flash of something vulnerable in his eyes before he'd fled the church. December arrived with more snow. Eleanor had learned to dress properly now, in practical wool and sturdy boots, her fancy dresses packed away. She could split wood and haul water and handle a rifle. The whispers in town were changing, slowly. She's tougher than she looks, people started saying. Maybe she'll make it after all. But Eleanor wasn't satisfied with maybe. She wanted to prove herself beyond doubt. And if she was honest, she wanted to see Pike Merrick again. The opportunity came in mid-December, when a traveling peddler arrived in town with news. Saw smoke signals up in the high country, he told the men gathered at the general store. Indian style, but there's no Indians up that way anymore. Might be trouble. Could be Pike, someone said. He uses smoke signals sometimes when he needs help. Pike Merrick asking for help? Another man scoffed. Man hasn't needed help in his life. Everyone needs help sometime, Margaret said firmly. Someone should go check. The men looked at each other. It was a hard ride in winter, dangerous even for experienced mountain men. I'll go in a few days, one finally said, when the weather clears. A few days might be too late, Eleanor said. Everyone turned to stare at her. If he needs help now, we should go now. We? The storekeeper shook his head. Miss Harrison, with all respect, this isn't a job for a woman, especially not one who just learned to ride a few months ago. I can ride, Eleanor said. I can shoot. I can handle myself in the mountains. I've proven that. You went up once and got hurt. Another man pointed out. Pike had to save you. Now you want to go save him? That's backwards, miss. Eleanor felt her temper rise. So no one is going to help him because you all think it might not be important enough? And I can't help because I'm a woman, and you've all decided I'm too delicate, despite everything I've done to prove otherwise? The silence was uncomfortable. Finally, the town sheriff spoke up. I'll organize a group to go tomorrow if the weather holds. That's the best I can offer. Eleanor looked at Margaret. Her aunt looked back, understanding in her eyes. Eleanor made her decision. That night, she packed supplies. Food, water, blankets, ammunition, matches. She left a note for Margaret. Gone to help Pike. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I'll be careful. She saddled her horse in the dark before dawn and rode out of town, heading for the high country. The sky was clear, stars blazing above the dark mountains. It was cold, the kind of cold that burned her lungs. But Eleanor had dressed warmly, and she knew the way. She had studied the route carefully during her last trip, memorizing landmarks. The ride took all day. By late afternoon, She was in territory she recognized, nearing Pike's cabin. She didn't see any smoke signals, but she did see something else. Tracks in the snow, lots of them, and blood. Eleanor's heart hammered as she followed the tracks. They led away from Pike's cabin, deeper into the wilderness. She could see where someone had been dragged, then walked, then dragged again. The blood trail continued, dark against the white snow. She found him just before dusk, collapsed against a tree about 2 miles from his cabin. Pike Merrick, who seemed invincible, was bleeding from a wound in his side and barely conscious. "Pike!" Eleanor was off her horse in seconds, kneeling beside him. What happened? His eyes struggled to focus on her. "Eleanor, no, you shouldn't be here. Dangerous. You're hurt. I'm not leaving you." She examined the wound. It looked like a knife cut, deep but clean. "Who did this?" "Men. 3 of them. Wanted my furs, my supplies. I fought them off, but..." He winced. "One got lucky with a knife." "Where are they now?" "Ran off when I wounded 2 of them. Might come back, though." He tried to sit up and nearly passed out. "You need to leave. Get back to town." "Not without you." Eleanor's mind raced. His cabin was closer than town, and he was in no condition for the long ride down the mountain. "Can you ride if I help you?" "Maybe, if I don't bleed out first." "You're not going to bleed out. I won't let you." Eleanor pressed her scarf against his wound, and he grunted in pain. "I need to get you to your cabin." "Can you stand?" It took everything both of them had, but they got Pike onto Eleanor's horse. She led the animal carefully through the darkening forest, one hand on Pike's leg to steady him, praying he wouldn't fall. He swayed in the saddle, barely holding on, but he stayed mounted. By the time they reached his cabin, full dark had fallen. Eleanor helped Pike down and half carried, half dragged him inside. She got a fire going, then turned her attention to his wound. "I need to see it," she said, reaching for his shirt. "Eleanor, you shouldn't." "We're past propriety now. Take off your shirt or I'll cut it off." He looked at her, something like admiration in his pain-filled eyes. "You've changed since Boston. You have no idea." She helped him remove his shirt, trying not to stare at the expanse of his chest and shoulders, all hard muscle and old scars. The knife wound was in his side, still bleeding sluggishly. "This needs stitches. I've got a needle and thread in the cupboard, and whiskey." Eleanor found both. She'd never stitched human flesh before, but she'd watched the doctor tend her father once after an accident. Her hands shook as she threaded the needle. "You don't have to do this," Pike said. "I can do it myself." "With one hand while half conscious?" "I don't think so." Eleanor poured whiskey over the wound, and Pike hissed through his teeth. "This is going to hurt. Just do it." She did. Pike gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. But he didn't make a sound as Eleanor stitched the wound closed with small, careful stitches. Her hands steadied as she worked, focusing entirely on the task. When she finished, she bandaged him tightly and gave him the whiskey bottle. "Drink, you've earned it." He took a long swallow, then looked at her. "You rode up here alone in winter to help me." "Of course I did." "Why?" Eleanor met his eyes. "Because you needed help. Because I care what happens to you. Because I'm tired of sitting around being told I'm too delicate to do anything that matters. You stitched me up without hesitation. Most women would have fainted." "I'm not most women," Eleanor said, echoing his words to her from weeks ago. "No," Pike agreed softly. "You're really not." They stared at each other across the small cabin, and the air between them felt charged, electric. Then Pike swayed, and Eleanor caught him. "Bed. Now. You've lost too much blood." She helped him to the bed and covered him with furs. His skin was too cold, his face too pale. Eleanor stoked the fire high, then sat beside him, monitoring his breathing, his color, the bandage for any fresh bleeding. Around midnight, he woke. "Eleanor, I'm here. Why aren't you sleeping? I'm watching over you." He reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, but warm. "Thank you. For coming. For staying. For saving my life. You saved mine first. We're even." "No." His eyes were serious despite his weakness. "We're not even close to even. You rode into danger alone to help me. That's either the bravest or the most foolish thing anyone has ever done for me." "Which do you think it is?" "Both." He squeezed her hand gently. "You could have died. So could you if I hadn't come." "Eleanor." He said her name like a prayer. "I don't know what to do with you. What do you want to do with me?" The question hung in the air between them. Pike looked at her, and in his eyes, Eleanor saw longing and fear and something deeper, something that made her heart race. "I want to keep you," he said quietly. "I want to keep you here with me in this cabin, and never let you go back to a world that will always think you're too delicate, too soft, too refined for the real work of living. I want to show you everything I know about these mountains, teach you every skill I have. I want to watch you become the strong woman I know you already are inside. I want to wake up every morning with you beside me, and fall asleep every night knowing you're safe." Eleanor's breath caught. "Then why won't you?" "Because I have nothing to offer you. No money, no future, just a cabin in the mountains and a past I'm not proud of. You deserve so much better than a broken man hiding from his mistakes." "Tell me about your past," Eleanor said. "Please, let me decide what I can handle." Pike was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to talk. "I had a wife," he said, "back in Oregon. Her name was Catherine. We married young, had a small farm. It was good for a while. Then the drought came, 3 years of it. Crops failed, animals died. Catherine got sick that last winter. We had no money for doctors, no medicine. I watched her waste away, and I couldn't do anything to help her. She died in my arms, begging me to save her, and I was useless." His voice broke on the last word. Eleanor squeezed his hand. "When she died, something in me died too. I sold the farm for what little I could get and came to California. Figured I'd live alone, never get close to anyone again. Never have to watch someone I love suffer because I wasn't strong enough, wasn't man enough to protect them." "Oh, Pike," Eleanor whispered. "That wasn't your fault. You couldn't control the drought, couldn't control sickness. Couldn't provide for my wife either. Couldn't save her. You did everything you could. Losing her broke your heart. But it doesn't mean you failed her." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet. "I swore I'd never care about anyone like that again. Never risk that kind of pain. And then you walked into my life. This delicate Boston lady who everyone said would break at the first hardship. Except you didn't break. You got stronger. You learned and grew and survived. You rode alone through winter mountains to save me. And now I'm terrified, Eleanor, because I care about you more than I thought I could care about anyone again." Eleanor felt tears on her own cheeks. "I'm terrified too. I've never felt this way about anyone. But I'm not Catherine, Pike. I'm stronger than I look. I'm not going to break." "Everyone breaks eventually," he said sadly. "Not if we hold each other together." She leaned down and kissed him, gentle and careful. mindful of his injury. Pike's hand came up to cup her face, his touch tender despite the calluses. When she pulled back, his eyes were full of wonder. "Eleanor Harrison," he said, "you are the most amazing woman I have ever known." "Then stop pushing me away," Eleanor said. "I choose you, Pike. I choose this life, these mountains, all of it. I'm not some delicate flower that needs to be kept in a glass case. I'm strong enough for this. I'm strong enough for us." "I know you are," he said. "I've known it for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. And now? Now I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of losing you because I was too much of a coward to take a chance." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." She sat with him through the night, dozing occasionally, but mostly watching over him. By morning, his color was better, and he was sleeping peacefully. Eleanor made breakfast from his supplies, then checked his wound. It looked clean, no signs of infection. When Pike woke, he was stronger. "You should get back to town," he said. "People will worry." "Let them worry. I'm not leaving until you're well enough to travel with me." "Eleanor, that could be days." "Then we'll have days together. I can't think of anything I'd rather do." They fell into a routine over the next several days. Eleanor cooked and cleaned and changed his bandages. Pike rested and healed and watched her move around his cabin like she belonged there. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives, their dreams, their fears. Eleanor told him about her suffocating childhood, the constant messages that she was too fragile for the world. Pike told her more about Catherine, about his failed farm, about the guilt that had driven him into the mountains. "I understand now," Eleanor said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Why you live up here alone. But Pike, punishing yourself forever won't bring Catherine back. She wouldn't want this for you, would she? A life of isolation and loneliness?" "Probably not," he admitted. "She always said I was meant to be surrounded by family, by people who loved me. Said I was too warm-hearted to be alone." She was right. On the fourth day, the sheriff and a group of men from town arrived at Pike's cabin, having finally made the journey to check on the smoke signals. They found Eleanor cooking breakfast while Pike sat at the table, pale but healing. The shock on their faces would have been comical if Eleanor hadn't been so annoyed by it. "Miss Harrison," the sheriff sputtered. "What are you doing here?" "Saving Mr. Merrick's life," Eleanor said calmly. "He was attacked by thieves and stabbed. I found him, brought him here, and stitched his wound. He's recovering well." The men stared at her, then at Pike, then back at her. "You rode up here alone?" one asked. "Yes." "Through Winter Mountains?" "Yes." "And you stitched him up yourself?" "Yes." "Are there any other questions? Or would you like to eat breakfast? I made plenty." The men ate breakfast in stunned silence, while Eleanor and Pike exchanged amused glances. When they prepared to leave, the sheriff pulled Pike aside. "That woman is something special," he said. "If you let her get away, you're a fool." "I know," Pike said. "Believe me, I know." Before they left, Pike announced he would be coming down to town as soon as he was healed enough to travel. "Got some business to take care of," he said, looking at Eleanor. The ride back to Yreka was triumphant. Word had already spread somehow, the way news always did in small towns, and people lined the street to watch Eleanor ride in. The delicate Boston lady had ridden alone into the mountains in winter and saved the mountain man's life. The whispers had changed entirely now. "She's braver than most of the men in town," people said. "She's proven herself beyond doubt." Margaret hugged Eleanor so hard she could barely breathe. "You scared me half to death," she said. "But I'm so proud of you I could burst." "I had to help him," Eleanor said simply. "I know. And now everyone in town knows what I've known all along. You're strong enough for anything." Pike came to town a week later, healed enough to travel. Eleanor was at the general store when he walked in, and her heart leapt at the sight of him. He looked better, color back in his face, moving without pain. "Eleanor," he said, "can we talk?" They walked to the edge of town, to a quiet spot overlooking the creek. Pike took her hands in his. "I've spent the last week thinking," he said, "about what I want from life, about what Catherine would have wanted for me, about you." Eleanor held her breath. "I love you," Pike said. "I didn't want to. I fought against it. But I love you, Eleanor Harrison. You're brave and strong and kind, and you see me for who I really am, not just the mountain man everyone else sees. You saved my life in more ways than one." "I love you too," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "I've loved you since that first time you carried me into your cabin and tended my ankle like I was something precious." "You are precious," Pike said fiercely. "You're a treasure, and if you'll have me, I'll handle you with the care a treasure deserves for the rest of my life." "Yes," Eleanor said. "Yes, yes, yes." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Eleanor felt like her heart might burst from happiness. When they finally broke apart, they were both grinning like fools. "I need to do this right, though," Pike said. "I need to talk to your aunt, ask properly for permission to court you, and I need to figure out how we'll live. I won't ask you to give up everything and live isolated in the mountains." "What if I want to live in the mountains?" "Eleanor, I'm serious. I love it up there. I love the quiet and the forest and the feeling of being truly alive. But I also love this town and the people here. So maybe we find a balance. Maybe we build a cabin closer to town, but still in the mountains. Maybe we spend winters down here and summers up high. We'll figure it out together." Pike looked at her with such love, it took her breath away. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Eleanor said. They courted properly after that, though everyone in town knew the outcome was never in doubt. Pike came to dinner at Margaret's house every Sunday. He and Eleanor took long walks together, chaperoned by Margaret or another respectable townswoman. They made plans for their future, their voices low and excited. In January, Pike officially proposed, presenting Eleanor with a ring he'd carved himself from a piece of jade he'd found in the mountains. It was rough and imperfect, and the most beautiful thing Eleanor had ever seen. They were married in February, in the same church where Pike had run from Eleanor on Thanksgiving. The whole town came to the wedding, watching as the mountain man and the Boston lady pledged their lives to each other. "I, Pike Merrick, take you, Eleanor Harrison, to be my wife," Pike said, his deep voice clear and strong. "I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you. I promise to see your strength and never mistake gentleness for weakness. I promise to build a life with you filled with adventure and love, and everything good this world has to offer. I, Eleanor Harrison, take you, Pike Merrick, to be my husband," Eleanor said through happy tears. "I promise to love you, stand beside you, and be your partner in all things. I promise to be brave and strong and true. I promise to build a life with you, filled with all the wild beauty of these mountains and all the warmth of a true home." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Pike kissed her with a passion that made the congregation whistle and cheer. Eleanor laughed against his mouth, happier than she had ever been. They spent their wedding night in Pike's cabin, which would be their home until they could build something closer to town. Eleanor had been nervous about this part, but Pike was gentle and patient, treating her like the treasure he'd promised she was. "Are you happy?" he asked afterward, holding her close beneath the furs. "Happier than I knew was possible," Eleanor said. "Are you?" "More than I deserve to be." "You deserve everything good," Eleanor said firmly, "and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." True to their plans, they found land halfway between Pike's mountain cabin and Yreka, where the forest was thick, but the town was close enough for community. That spring, Pike built them a house, solid logs and a stone fireplace, big enough for the family they both wanted. Eleanor threw herself into their new life. She learned everything Pike could teach her about surviving in the mountains, tracking, hunting, fishing, identifying plants. She became an expert at tanning hides and preserving meat. But she also kept her connections to town, teaching children to read, helping at the store, maintaining the friendships she had built. No one called her delicate anymore. Eleanor Merrick was known as one of the strongest women in the territory, someone who could handle anything the wilderness threw at her. The transformation from the frightened Boston lady who had arrived 18 months ago was complete. Their first child came in the spring of 1878, a son they named Thomas after Pike's father. Pike wept when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by the gift of this second chance at family. "I'm scared," he admitted to Eleanor as she recovered. "Scared something will happen to you or to him. Scared I'll fail you both the way I failed Catherine." "You didn't fail Catherine," Eleanor said firmly. "And you won't fail us. We're strong, Pike, all of us. We're going to be fine." And they were. Thomas thrived, growing into a healthy, happy baby. A daughter followed 2 years later, whom they named Margaret after Eleanor's aunt. Then another son and another daughter, until their cabin rang with the sounds of children's laughter. Pike proved to be a wonderful father, patient and loving, teaching his children everything he knew about the mountains. Eleanor raised them to be strong and capable, boys and girls alike learning to ride and shoot and survive. But she also taught them gentleness, kindness, the value of community and love. Over the years, Pike's reputation in the territory grew. He became known as someone who could be counted on in a crisis, who would ride through any storm to help a neighbor. He served occasionally as a guide for travelers through the mountains, and his tracking skills solved more than one mystery when someone went missing. Eleanor became a respected leader in the community as well. She started a school in Yreka, teaching not just reading and writing, but practical skills that would help children survive in the harsh country. She served as a midwife, using skills she had learned from Margaret and books she ordered from back east. She proved again and again that strength came in many forms. One evening, when they had been married for 10 years and their children were playing outside their cabin in the long summer twilight, Pike pulled Eleanor close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Leaving Boston, giving up the comfortable life you could have had?" Eleanor laughed. "Regret it? Pike, I've never regretted it for a single moment. That wasn't living what I had in Boston. It was existing in a pretty cage. This is living. Every hard day, every challenge, every moment of joy and sorrow and everything in between. This is the life I was meant for. You've exceeded every expectation anyone had for you." "No," Eleanor said. "I just finally got the chance to show what I was capable of all along. Everyone thought I was too delicate for this life. But you saw past that. You said you'd handle me with care, like the treasure I am. And you have, every single day. But you also trusted me to be strong when I needed to be." "Because you are strong," Pike said. "Strongest person I know." "We're strong together," Eleanor corrected. "That's what matters." They sat together as the sun set over the mountains, their children's laughter floating on the evening air. And Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the suffocating parlors of Boston to this wild, free life in the California mountains. From the girl everyone called too delicate to the woman who had proven she could handle anything. She thought about all the people who had doubted her, who had whispered that she wouldn't last a month in the West. She wished they could see her now, strong and capable and deeply, completely happy. But most of all, she thought about Pike, the mountain man who had seen past her delicate exterior to the strength underneath, who had loved her enough to let her prove herself, who had kept his promise to handle her with care while also believing in her ability to handle anything life threw at them. "I love you," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I love you too," Pike said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "My treasure, my partner, my everything." As night fell over their mountain home, the stars came out one by one, brilliant in the clear air. Inside the cabin, a fire crackled in the hearth. Their children came in tired and happy, ready for bed. Eleanor and Pike tucked them in, listening to their sleepy chatter about the day's adventures. Later, in their own bed beneath the quilts Eleanor had stitched, Pike held her close and they talked quietly about the future. They had dreams still, plans to make, adventures to share. Thomas wanted to learn to track like his father. Margaret was showing a talent for healing like her mother. The younger children were growing fast, full of questions about the world. "Do you think we'll grow old here?" Eleanor asked. "In these mountains?" "I hope so," Pike said. "Can't imagine anywhere else I'd rather be. Can you?" "No," Eleanor said with absolute certainty. "This is home. This is where we belong." And it was. Through the passing years, through hard winters and dry summers, through times of plenty and times of scarcity, they stayed. They raised their children to be strong and kind, to respect the land and the people around them. They built a life that was rich in all the ways that mattered. When their children were grown and starting families of their own, Pike and Eleanor moved back to the original mountain cabin, the place where their love story had truly begun. It had been expanded and improved over the years, but the bones of it remained the same. "Remember when you carried me in here the first time?" Eleanor asked one winter evening as they sat by the fire. "How could I forget? I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen and the most out of place. I was sure you'd run back to Boston within a week. And instead, I stitched you up in this very cabin and refused to leave." "Best decision you ever made," Pike said, pulling her close. "Second best," Eleanor corrected. "The best decision was getting on that stagecoach in the first place, choosing to come west, to find out who I really was." "And who are you, Eleanor Merrick?" Eleanor smiled. "I'm strong. I'm capable. I'm brave. I'm all the things they said I could never be. But I'm also still me. Still the woman who likes pretty things and enjoys a good book. Still someone who needs gentleness sometimes. The difference is, now I know that needing gentleness doesn't make me weak. And being strong doesn't mean I can never be soft." "You're perfect," Pike said simply. "Everything I never knew I needed." They grew old together in those mountains, their love deepening with every passing year. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their family spreading across the territory like roots from a strong tree. Every one of their descendants knew the story of how Eleanor Harrison came west from Boston and proved everyone wrong about what a delicate lady could do. On Eleanor's 70th birthday, their whole family gathered at the mountain cabin to celebrate. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled the house and spilled out into the yard. There was food and music and laughter, and Eleanor looked around at everything she and Pike had built together and felt nothing but gratitude. That night, after everyone had left or settled in for sleep, she and Pike sat together on the porch and looked up at the stars. "Thank you," Eleanor said. "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing in me. For loving me exactly as I am while also helping me become everything I could be." Pike took her hand, his grip still strong despite his years. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life in every way that matters. I was so lost when you found me, so convinced I didn't deserve happiness. You showed me I was wrong." "We saved each other," Eleanor said. "That's what love does. It makes us both stronger than we could ever be alone." They sat in comfortable silence, these two people who had found each other against all odds. The delicate lady and the mountain man. The woman everyone said was too soft for the harsh Western life, and the man who had promised to handle her with care like the treasure she was. He had kept that promise every single day of their life together. But more than that, he had trusted her to be strong when strength was needed. He had supported her when she stumbled and celebrated with her when she succeeded. He had been her partner in the truest sense of the word. And Eleanor had given him back his life, his heart, his belief in second chances. She had shown him that loving again didn't mean betraying his past, that being happy didn't mean forgetting the pain. She had filled his solitary existence with warmth and laughter and love. They had built something beautiful together, something that would last long after they were gone. A family, a legacy, a love story that would be told for generations. Years later, when they were both very old, Pike's health began to fail. Eleanor nursed him with the same fierce determination she had shown that winter day when she'd stitched his knife wound. But they both knew this was a fight he would eventually lose. "I'm not afraid," he told her one evening. "I've had more happiness than any man deserves. I've loved and been loved. I've watched my children and grandchildren thrive. I've spent every day of the last 40 years with the most amazing woman I've ever known. I have no regrets, Eleanor. None." "I'll miss you," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "Every single day for the rest of my life." "I'll be waiting for you," Pike promised. "And in the meantime, you keep being the force of nature you've always been. Keep showing everyone what strength really looks like. Promise me." "I promise." He died peacefully in his sleep a few nights later, Eleanor holding his hand. She grieved deeply but without despair, knowing that their love would never truly end. It lived on in their children, in the land they had tended, in the community they had served, in every life they had touched. Eleanor lived another 5 years, remaining strong and active until the very end. She taught her great-grandchildren to ride and shoot. She told them stories of their grandfather, keeping his memory alive. She continued to be a force in the community, someone people turned to for wisdom and help. When her time came, she was ready. Her family gathered around her, and she looked at each beloved face and felt nothing but gratitude for the incredible life she had lived. "Tell me again," her youngest great-granddaughter asked. "Tell me about how you and great-grandfather fell in love." Eleanor smiled. "Everyone said I was too delicate for the West," she began, her voice weak but clear. "But your great-grandfather saw past that. He said if I was delicate, then he would handle me with care, like the treasure I am. And he did, every single day. But he also believed I was strong enough to handle anything. And together, we proved everyone wrong. You weren't delicate at all. the little girl said. No, sweetheart. I was both. I was delicate and strong, gentle and fierce, soft and tough. We all are. We contain multitudes. Don't let anyone ever tell you that you're just one thing. You're everything you need to be. Those were among Eleanor's last words. She died that night, peacefully, surrounded by the family she and Pike had created. And though there were tears and grief, there was also celebration. Celebration of a life fully lived, of love fully given, of promises kept and dreams realized. They buried her next to Pike on the mountain they had both loved, where wildflowers grew in summer and snow fell softly in winter. Their grave became a place where family gathered to remember and honor them, to tell their story to new generations. The story of Eleanor Harrison, who came west from Boston and became Eleanor Merrick, mountain woman and pioneer, who proved that delicate and strong weren't opposites, but could exist together in the same person, who showed that love could heal old wounds and build new dreams. And the story of Pike Merrick, the mountain man who had lost everything and found it again, who learned that protecting someone didn't mean keeping them weak, and that strength came in many forms, who kept his promise to handle his treasure with care while also believing in her power. Together, they had built something that would last forever, a love that had overcome doubt and fear and pain, a family that would carry their legacy forward, a story that would be told around fires and dinner tables for generations to come. They said she was too delicate. The mountain man said then he would handle her with care, like the treasure she was. And in doing both, in being both careful and trusting, protective and empowering, they had created something beautiful, a love for the ages, a partnership that had weathered every storm, a life that proved that when two people truly see each other, truly believe in each other, anything is possible. In the mountains of Northern California, where the pines grow tall and the creeks run cold and clear, their story lives on, in the strong hands of their descendants, in the community they helped build, in every person who has ever been told they are too delicate, too soft, too weak for the life they want to live. Eleanor and Pike's story whispers through the trees. You are stronger than anyone believes. You are more than what others see. And when you find someone who sees all of you, who loves both your strength and your softness, who handles you with care while believing in your power, hold on to them with everything you have. That is the greatest treasure of all. Their cabin still stands, maintained by family who use it in the summers. Inside, above the fireplace, hangs a carved wooden plaque with words Pike carved and Eleanor painted. She was told she was too delicate. He promised to handle her with care. Together, they proved that love makes us strong enough for anything. And that, in the end, was the truth of their story. Not that Eleanor proved she wasn't delicate, not that Pike learned to stop protecting her, but that together, they created a space where both things could be true at once, where she could be treasured and trusted, where he could be strong and vulnerable, where love was both gentle and fierce, careful and bold, protective and empowering. They lived and loved and built a legacy that would never fade. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, they are together still. The delicate lady who was stronger than anyone knew. The mountain man who learned that love was worth the risk. Two souls who found each other against all odds and held on through everything, forever.